Caitlyn Clark, to some degree, is saving the WNBA. It is an incredibly harsh truth. This league was in some trouble. They weren't making money. They were downsizing arenas. Nobody's watching the final. And it has been totally subsidized. This is the Caitlyn Clark effect.
All of this success, every bit of it, is due to the presence of one player in the league, and that is a generational talent named Caitlyn Clark, who of course you've heard of, and still probably the only WNBA player whose name you know. She's the reason the WNBA just won the lottery. Without Caitlyn Clark, nobody cares about any of these players or the league.
This WNBA season has been one for the ages, thanks largely to the arrival of an amazingly talented and uniquely charismatic rookie, Caitlyn Clark of Indiana Fever. Clark brought her massive following from college with her into the Pro League, boosting attendance in arenas around the league and pushing TV viewership numbers into the stratosphere. The so-called Caitlyn Clark effect has been even more pronounced in the first round of playoffs, with 2 games in which Caitlyn appeared attracting millions of viewers and dwarfing the ratings of other playoff matchups. However, things changed completely once the Fever bowed out of the playoffs after losing to Connecticut Sun, as the interest for the remaining playoff games immediately waned, despite the stakes being higher in the semifinals round. This sudden drop calls for a question: can WNBA continue to grow its business model without Clark and her army of fans? It can be argued the league just wasn't ready for the explosion of interest in its product, and thus failed to maximize the newly created opportunities. For a while, it seemed like it didn't matter a whole lot, since Caitlyn's presence was filling the seats and drawing record-breaking TV audiences. Fever's early exit from the playoffs may have revealed a lack of strategy on the part of the league and demonstrated that most of the gains were created organically by Clark. More precisely, Caitlyn's new fans were eager to watch the games for as long as their idol was competing, but the league didn't do enough to feed their interest and turn them into fans of the sport rather than just one player. This is not exactly a new revelation, since the gap in attendance between Fever's home and away games versus non-Clark WNBA games was huge all season. Any objective observer could clearly see that the league was benefiting from Clark's ability to draw in people who otherwise don't watch female basketball at all and who just discovered how good WNBA basketball is. This target audience has different expectations and cultural notions than traditional WNBA fans, which might be a part of the explanation why the league hasn't been able to truly reach them with its marketing efforts. As things stand now, WNBA is facing a stark choice in the immediate future. It can either adapt to the new reality or risk missing this unique opportunity to grow and expand that might not come again soon. First, we need to show how much exactly WNBA is benefiting from its youngest superstar. The 2024 WNBA season has been historic by any metric, and it brought back excitement not seen since the 1990s, when the league was still a novelty. In terms of game attendance, there was an unprecedented influx of ticket-paying fans that was driven almost completely by Clark's popularity. The Fever went straight from the bottom of the league in attendance last year to the very top, while other teams' arenas also tended to be sold out whenever Caitlyn and company were in town. After years of languishing in the NBA's shadow, the Women's League finally became the main attraction for many viewers, and its finances had seen a corresponding bump. The numbers from the first round of the playoffs tell an even more eye-opening story about a league that is rapidly becoming relevant on the national stage. Caitlyn Clark's Fever qualified for the playoffs as the 6th seed and faced the Connecticut Sun in the first round, a veteran team that had home court advantage. While the Fever were never favored in this matchup, many analysts considered them to be a pesky opponent that could make some noise. Apparently, enough people were intrigued by the possibility of the Fever pulling off an upset that TV viewership reached levels not seen in decades. Just take a look at this summary of viewership stats for ESPN and ABC. The opening weekend was great from the network's perspective, as the Fever game drew 2.2 million people to see at least a part of the game. Even more importantly, fans wanted to see a bit of action that didn't include Caitlyn Clark, and the other games got quite solid numbers as well, although they couldn't reach 7-figure viewership. Game 2 between the Fever and the Sun got even better ratings, topping out at 3.4 million viewers during peak time. Things looked really good for the moment, except for one little thing. The Fever lost both of their playoff games, and Clark was forced to take an early vacation. As it turned out, the celebratory mood turned out to be short-lived as the ratings promptly plummeted once Clark wasn't in the playoff picture any longer. To make things worse, it seems like everyone knew what was going to happen in advance and just shrugged about the whole business. WNBA and the mainstream media that support it were happy to pick up the extra cash, but did little to keep the momentum going. In fact, top networks anticipated the ratings drop and immediately started adjusting their schedules, effectively accelerating the loss of attention. Here is how ESPN did that for the round 2, knowing that without Clark, it can't hope for gargantuan numbers seen in the opening round. They moved Las Vegas, New York, and Connecticut, Minnesota games to ESPN2, saving primetime space on the primary channel for other content. Who even watches ESPN2? Without stronger support from the big media, corporate sponsors, and top sports commentators, the league can't survive Clark's exit and stay financially intact. The financial consequences of this failure to act are tremendous. Not to mention that it's a shame that some very good playoff basketball will remain on the margins because of it. There is an obvious lack of corporate readiness to adjust to the new reality, and perhaps just as damagingly, a nearly complete lack of initiative on the part of the WNBA's top decision-makers. Did anyone stop to ask what will happen if the Golden Goose rookie loses in the first round, and there is a month more to go without the headliner driving up the numbers? Judging by the outcomes, this didn't happen. The whole fiasco was entirely predictable and probably avoidable. In fact, numerous bloggers and podcasters were talking about it very loudly since the start of the playoffs, pointing out that the Caitlyn Clark effect doesn't really work without the woman whose name it bears. Even during the opening round, there was a large discrepancy between the games played on nights when Fever was active and those when Clark wasn't slated to take the court. Here is how popular podcaster Ben Daniels summarized the issue that was brewing for the WNBA leading into the second round.
How will a non-Caitlyn Clark evening perform? Now, the non-Caitlyn Clark games on Sunday, they didn't perform too well. The Seattle Storm versus Los Angeles Aces, 461,000. The Atlanta Dream versus the New York Liberty, 410,000. The Phoenix Mercury versus the Minnesota Lynx, 403,000.
This gap provided some strong hints that a lot of fans are more interested in seeing how Caitlyn Clark will fare than in following the quest to win the WNBA championship. While many of the people who would tune in for the Fever game would go on to watch another game, whenever Caitlyn had a night off, they didn't even bother to turn the TV on. Without the flagship attraction, WNBA content didn't seem nearly as attractive to a large part of the audience. Basically, we could say that Clark served as a reminder that the league exists and that its playoff competition is in progress. If this was clear days ago, how is it possible that the league still allowed the audience to lose interest after Clark's elimination? The whole dilemma cuts much deeper and touches on the question whether the league wants to build its entire promotional strategy around just one player. This is a sensitive question, as most WNBA stars are proud women who feel they deserve to be featured in the promo materials. However, the marketing reality is different, and the league simply needs to accept it, however awkward it may seem at the moment. Outkick journalist Clay Travis was looking at the numbers and musing, what is going to happen with all the Clark fans when they are unable to watch their muse drain long three-pointers and they are left with other WNBA stars to entertain them?
Sitting here thinking about all of the discussion that we had throughout the regular season, that the league is more than just one player. And that's true. I mean, I'm searched some of the numbers, Chad. Game 2 of Las Vegas and Seattle had 985,000 viewers. There was another game that held around 830,000 viewers. But I believe Game 1 with Caitlyn Clark and the Fever, they pulled in over 1.5 million. And now what happens to that viewership?
Not surprisingly, it turned out that the viewership evaporated without Clark to shore up the demand. The games in the second round are getting between 600,000 and 900,000 viewers, which is not bad, but is a far cry from record-breaking highs seen just a few days earlier. To compound the problem, arena attendance is not great either, with the games played in front of crowds smaller than 10,000 people, with nearly half of the seats empty. The teams were garnering more attention in the first round than in the second, despite the presence of numerous elite players and the fact that one of the matchups is a reprise of the last year's finals. This is the best example of the Caitlyn Clark effect in practice, and it shows that extra profits can't be taken for granted. While it's possible that the numbers might improve for the finals round, there is still a lot of money the league left on the table by mishandling this situation. There is a growing awareness among the WNBA insiders that Caitlyn Clark is a singular force that can change the fortunes of the league, as reflected by increasingly complimentary tone from pretty much everyone. Still, there is a large gap between acknowledging that things are changing and making a concerted effort to make the change sustainable, and the league as a whole doesn't quite appear ready to make that jump. The players are certainly noticing that the arenas have been much livelier this year than at any time in recent memory. They are enjoying playing in front of bigger crowds, not to mention all the perks that the new income will fund. Napheesa Collier of the Minnesota Lynx, who was this season's Defensive Player of the Year and finished second in MVP voting, is acknowledging that things feel different this year without referencing the reason why. Here is what she said when she was asked what she sees in the stands at home and away games.
People, which is what we want. It makes the game so fun. It's like your sixth man when you're at home, and then when you're away, you just can't wait to silence the crowd, and that's like the best feeling ever.
While Collier is having an impressive showing in the playoffs, that hasn't been enough to keep the viewers interested in her team. That alone represents a big loss for the league's marketing, especially considering how much buzz there currently is around WNBA and the various storylines related to it. Ironically, by failing to acknowledge Caitlyn Clark as the new face of the league, WNBA is doing a disservice to other stars who are consequently not getting the attention they deserve. If you are lucky enough to get a worldwide sensation that everyone wants to see, you should do everything in your power to derive long-term benefits from this unexpected blessing. It's hard to overstate how much impact Caitlyn Clark is having on the business side of the game. She literally generates instant revenues for the league and changes the perception of women's basketball from being a softer version of men's game to being beautiful and creative. Perhaps the best explanation of this reputation boost was offered by the former player and prominent ESPN analyst Rebecca Lobo, who described Caitlyn Clark as a tsunami that has descended upon WNBA. This metaphor is appropriate, both in describing the intensity of Clark's influence and the spontaneous nature of her popularity. In other words, Caitlyn is making a lot of money for a lot of people, but expecting her to single-handedly redefine WNBA's business model is just wishful thinking. The people in charge should be working hard to turn casual fans into long-term supporters, while Caitlyn's magic still works. Judging by the attitudes of WNBA's top bosses, they are still not quite there with the realization that Caitlyn Clark has to be treated as a unique case. Notably, the commissioner Kathy Engelbert has been all over the field with her comments on Clark, angering many fans by claiming WNBA players are paid well and failing to address hateful comments on the internet directed towards some players. She has proven to be tone-deaf once again when she was talking about the rising attendance and the factors that are driving it. Faced with a direct question about the Caitlyn Clark effect, she sought to spread the praise to the entire rookie class.
She's clearly an unbelievable player, came in with an unbelievable following, has brought a lot of new fans to the league. If you look at our historic season around our attendance, our viewership, Caitlyn, Angel Reese, Rakia Jackson, Cameron Brink, this class of rookies, we will be talking about them a generation from now.
The commissioner may just be trying to be diplomatic and avoid upsetting other players, or she might be trying to promote the whole rookie class when given the chance. Still, her answer to a direct question about Caitlyn Clark quickly meandered to Angel Reese without truly giving full credit to Clark. While this may be just a way of speaking, it shows the underlying attitude that no player can be bigger than the game, even if the facts prove otherwise. Engelbert has the ultimate responsibility to keep the ratings high, and she doesn't really look like she is in full command of the situation. If the ratings stay underwhelming the rest of the playoffs, she is sure to hear even more criticism during the offseason and possibly calls for her resignation. WNBA shouldn't overthink this. It's clear who is bringing in the fans and the extra revenues, so it's obvious what the strategy should be going forward. There is no point pretending that some egalitarian approach can replicate the results that Caitlyn alone is creating. The league should go all in on promoting Clark and trying to tie her into every activity possible, even when she is not playing. After all, it's pretty common in sports to base the entire promotion plan on a single most popular performer, and there are examples from golf, gymnastics, or athletics that prove this is viable. It may be true that basketball is a team sport, but it is also driven by stars much more than football or hockey. Respected sports journalist Dan Patrick had some intriguing thoughts on this subject that WNBA should be wise to think about.
Eyeballs on the WNBA really have to do with Caitlyn Clark. Now, you might, if you stay long enough, maybe you'll see something or someone that you go, okay, I'm entertained by this. But there's nothing wrong with admitting that you watch a sport because of one singular person. People watched golf because of Tiger, right? You tuned in. No matter what event Tiger was playing, you were going to watch. They're still trying to capitalize on him.
Patrick is very exact on how you can transfer popularity of one player to an entire league. It's all about entertaining casual fans and providing them with simple ways to learn more about the competition and the best players. For too long, WNBA has tried to sell its product by emphasizing quality of play, but that approach brought only limited gains, as it appealed primarily to hardcore basketball fans. By focusing more on personalities of key players and letting Caitlyn Clark shine as bright as she can, the league can finally reach a demographic that previously didn't care much about this sport. Clark is already present in the mainstream consciousness in America, and the league could follow her there if it stops resisting. Tiger Woods is not the only example of an athlete that became synonymous with his sport and dramatically improved its commercial aspect. It happened in basketball several decades ago when Michael Jordan became universally celebrated among people who didn't follow sports. Seasoned sports commentator Stephen A. Smith remembers this time well, which is why we should take him seriously when he is comparing Caitlyn Clark to his heiress. He has been supporting Clark all year long, and his latest comments on this topic leave no room for doubt about where he stands.
Caitlyn Clark got you watching the league because it wasn't just her. You wanted to see who eventually she was going to end up going against. You saw other folks trying to get at her and trying to get at her team, and you saw fans and all of this other stuff going on, which we will get into, right? She has you transfixed on the entire league. That's why I brought up Michael Jordan.
Sure, Caitlyn has a lot more to accomplish before she can hope to be on Jordan's level as a basketball player, but as a media star, she can almost match him right now. Smith correctly says that it was Clark who got a lot of people intrigued by the WNBA in the first place, so it would only be logical that her presence is amplified in every way possible. Much like the NBA hitched to Jordan's growing fame to reach previously untapped global markets, WNBA should take full advantage of the current status that Clark enjoys among people who only casually follow basketball. Hopefully, that could unlock amazing potential for growth and allow the league to follow the same upwards trajectory as the men's pro league once did. Of course, the league also needs its corporate partners to step up, and right now they are dragging their feet. Nike made waves this spring when it signed Caitlyn Clark to an 8-year, $28 million deal that included an agreement to release her signature shoe, but it has since done very little to raise the stature of this partnership. At the end of Clark's rookie season, the shoe still hasn't materialized, and some people are wondering whether there is a hidden agenda behind such a decision. NBA analyst Ethan Strauss and his guest Nate Jones recently debated this question on their podcast and came to some interesting conclusions.
The most talked about new entrant to the basketball world, and you don't have product for her. And I think a lot of it has to do with managing everything that they're hearing from athletes and participants.
Nike seems to be aware that releasing Caitlyn's shoe might anger some veteran WNBA players who also have contracts with the company, and is careful not to step on anyone's toes. Corporations generally look to avoid controversy when they can, but in this case, Nike is plainly wrong to delay Caitlyn's design. She has been in the center of attention for months, and putting a product with her name on the shelf would have created tremendous profits and added even more visibility to Clark. Such a decision probably wouldn't directly affect WNBA attendance and TV ratings, although it could support the league's efforts to promote its young superstar and keep her in the minds of basketball fans across the U.S. even after her season ended. We still don't know when the shoe will be launched, but we can only hope it will be ready sooner rather than later. So while the WNBA certainly has reasons to be happy with how this season went, there is a feeling that the league isn't well prepared to capitalize on the Caitlyn Clark effect. The previously used marketing approach doesn't fit the current situation too well, but WNBA leaders and its marketing partners are still playing the game of wait and see. Well, they have seen the numbers drop precipitously after Caitlyn exited the playoff stage, so hopefully that will be enough to cause them to reconsider their careful stance. The entire league needs to get wholeheartedly behind Clark and support her ascent to superstardom. If this is done correctly, it won't be long before WNBA ratings start consistently rivaling NBA and NFL games in terms of public attention.